Kyle Busch spoke more about his future this past weekend in the media center. Bubba Wallace signed a multi-year contract extension with 2311 Racing, and it's sounding like the Texas Motor Speedway might be getting demolished and maybe reconfigured after 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into this really quickly. We're going to start off with Worldwide Express. As it was announced on Saturday that Worldwide Express has been named the official logistics partner of NASCAR. Worldwide Express is a big partner of Trackhouse Racing, also Nice Motorsports. Of course, both of them kind of have an association now in NASCAR. And it's really cool to see that Worldwide Express, a company that just joined this past year, is really stepping up and becoming a major partner of NASCAR. I think it's really cool to see Worldwide Express grow as a company. They've only been around for a few years. It's great to see that Worldwide Express has been named the official logistics partner of NASCAR. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about exhaust. It was reported a couple days ago by Bob Pockers that he says, in response to Busch's and Logano's fires at Indy, where exhaust got pushed back into rocker bogs, melt the panels around there, and then lit the foam that is inside the per door, NASCAR will require an exhaust shroud over at the exhaust tip. Now, for those of you who did not watch Indy Road Course, you probably saw a couple fires that have taken place due to basically stuff getting pushed into the rocker box. It's good to see that NASCAR is basically requiring things so we can have more safety in the sport, because the more safety you have, the better it's going to be. I think this is a really great change, in my honest opinion. I think this is amazing to see for sure, and I love it. They're basically making these changes to make these cars a little bit safer. Chris Busch and Joe Logano seem really happy about this. We know that we've had other safety issues come up, but it seems like NASCAR is trying to be at least some more proactive with safety, and I love to see this. That's good to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Tony Breininger. As it was announced on Friday evening that Tony Breininger is going to be joining the Toyota Gazoo Racing Cup North America in 2023 full-time. Tony Breininger currently competes full-time in ARCA and Venturing Motorsports' number 25 car. She hasn't done fantastic in ARCA this year, to be honest, but I think this is a really good move for her. I love that she's basically going out there and racing in Toyota Gazoo Racing full-time, which it sounds like to me that she won't be back in ARCA next year. I'm wishing her the best of luck, though. It's cool that she's got an opportunity to work with Toyota Gazoo Racing. I do not know what my expectations are going to be for her, though. I don't know how she will do. I hope she does well, because it'd be cool to see her do really well and be successful, because she's a really successful USAC driver, but hasn't really transitioned to ARCA. And sometimes drivers are better than USAC than they are in ARCA. But hoping the best for her. Hope she gets that opportunity, and hope she does really well and can get some great runs in that. It'd be cool for her to have a good opportunity to do really well, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Timmy Hill. As Timmy Hill is going to drive 13 for MBM Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. I believe this will be Timmy Hill's 6th or 7th attempt to make a race so far this year in the 13 car. And what's very interesting is that this car is actually going to be a Chevy instead of a Toyota, which I find very interesting. Timmy Hill's been doing okay in qualifying in this car. He hasn't ran a ton of races this year, as he's been more focused on his Truck Series team this year, which that team's had some good runs and also some not so good runs so far this year. But I think Timmy Hill makes the show, because there's going to be a lot of cars entering the Xfinity Series and also the Cup race too, if I'm not mistaken. But I think Timmy Hill will do solid enough, and hopefully Timmy can have a really strong run in the 13 car and be able to make the show this weekend at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stanton Barrett. As Stanton Barrett is making his official return, and he'll be driving the 47 for Mike Harmon Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. This, I believe, will be Stanton Barrett's first attempt at a NASCAR race in nearly 6 years, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a long time since Stanton Barrett has attempted a NASCAR race. Stanton Barrett, of course, at one point was driving for Roush Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series back in the day, in the early 2000s. Was a stunt, also known as a stuntman who does a lot of stunt work. So I think it's so cool to see that we're going to have Stanton Barrett coming back in racing. Now, of course, this car is going to need to qualify, since this car does not have a lot of owner's points. But I think if anybody can get it done behind a wheel when it comes to road course racing, I think Stanton Barrett is definitely the guy. I expect him to potentially make the field, but there's going to be a lot of depth and a lot of talent, so it's going to be hard to make the field, but I think they're going to have an opportunity to make the field. I think they're going to have a really good shot at making the field, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk more about the Chicago Street Course. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday morning that he reports that, according to him, the Chicago Alderman Brian Hopkins would have supported a NASCAR race, but wanted the city to get a better deal. It's embarrassing They got fleeced. Absolutely. The NASCAR people probably went and get a big cigar and left after they signed the contract. Wow, very, very strong words from an alderman in Brian Hopkins. Now, Brian Hopkins, we've already talked about him on the channel. He's been an alderman in Chicago for quite a few years now, and we've already talked about how he's been very, very outspoken about it. In fact, there's a lot of people in the Chicago area that have been very outspoken, and there's a lot of lack of support for the race in Chicago. Now, the race is expected to go through in 2023. There's not expected to be changes because apparently we kind of got updated confirmation, I believe, from the mayor's office that that's basically getting moved around. I think 2023 is the election, if I'm not mistaken. So, in my honest opinion, when it comes to this, I would rather have Road America, but I think it'll be big for the city generally. But man, I think it's going to be $500,000, $600,000 for the first year. Then it's going to go up year number 2. But there's also an option this event could go past 2025 and go into 2026 and 2027 if it succeeds. I do expect to see the first year, but will it succeed long term? That's one thing to watch, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about the Knoxville Nationals. Of course, this past weekend was the Knoxville Nationals. There were some NASCAR drivers that were competing in the Knoxville Nationals, including Kyle Larson. Now, the Knoxville Nationals is very, very interesting. The Saturday night A-Main was very interesting. There were a lot of tire problems. Kyle Larson had a flat right rear tire. I believe Terry McCarl had a flat right rear tire. And I believe also Carson had a flat right rear tire as well. This race would come down to a couple laps to go on a restart with Donnie Chance holding off hard chargers behind him, including Jacob Allen, and he went on to win his 11th Knoxville Nationals, which I believe is now tying Steve Kinsler on the all-time list at the Knoxville Nationals, and picking up a pretty big win for Donnie Schatz. It's been a little bit of a down year for Donnie Schatz this year in the Knoxville Nationals, and especially in World of Outlaws this year. But see Donnie, who's getting a lot older, who's been in the sport for nearly 20 years now, or actually 25 years he's been in this series, to see Donnie Schatz going out there and winning the Knoxville Nationals, I think is really, really cool. Now, a lot of people are wondering about Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, like I mentioned, had a flat right rear tire. He actually nearly came back and won this race. Ended up finishing 6th after restarting near the tail end of the field. He finished 6th in this race. So that's a really good comeback for Larson. If there would have been more green flag laps, I think Larson could have challenged Donnie Schatz for the overall win, but Larson still had a pretty good run. And remember, he had won the pole just before this happened. So for him to finish 6th in the race is really, really good to see. And congratulations to Donnie Schatz picking up the victory in the World of Outlaws. I think that's really awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NBC. As it was announced on the broadcast at the Cup race at Richmond, the NBC is going to once again be doing the radio-style broadcast this weekend at Watkins Glen, and they'll be bringing Mike Bagley back once again. This will be the first time we're doing the radio-style broadcast this year. They did it a couple times last year. I believe they did it at Watkins Glen. They did it, I believe, at the Indianapolis Road Course as well. And I think they did it at a couple other races over the years as well, including when they used to race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the big circuit. I've always been a big fan of the radio-style broadcast that NBC has done, and truthfully, in all honesty, I love what NBC does here. They try to change things up. They've had Dale Jr. do play-by-play, which, while I'd rather have Rick Allen do the commentary, I love that NBC's willing to try new things and go and try some new stuff. I think this is great to see. I'm happy they're bringing the radio-style broadcast back. I'm really excited about that for sure, and happy to see if they're changing some stuff up, because I think it's better to change things than not do anything, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's video, as we're talking about Chris Wright. As it was announced on Saturday morning that Chris Wright is going to drive a 68 for Brandon-Built Motorsports for 9 of the last 12 races. There'll be 3 races that Brandon Brown is going to run, but the other 9 races are going to be driven by Chris Wright, which will be first start will come at Watkins Glen. Now I want to talk about this for a minute, because I'm really, really not the happiest about this. Look, I understand that Brandon-Built Motorsports needs a lot of sponsorship and a lot of funding. But I'm going to be for real. Chris Wright had the most incidents of anybody in the Truck Series field this year, with over 30 incidents in the Truck Series this year, averaging almost 1 to 2 incidents per race in spinning out. Now, do I think that this car is an upgrade? Yes, I think that 44 truck is not the most fantastic, so I can't hate Chris Wright a lot for that. But Chris Wright, he was not great with Sandlot Racing when he drove for them. He was not great last year with Nice Motorsports. And he was not great last year, generally, in my honest opinion. He's gotten cut out of rides. There's a reason he got cut out of the 44 truck, because while, yes, he lost sponsorship, he struggled as well. Now, do I expect Chris Wright to maybe do okay? He might do okay. but I'm not really excited about Chris Wright getting behind the wheel. But they've got to get sponsorship funding, and unfortunately, with how the sport is, you've got to have sponsorship funding to stay in the sport long term. So while it sucks that this is happening, I feel for Brandon Brown. I understand why they have to do this. They have to do this to keep the team afloat long term. And in my opinion, it does suck. I hate that they have to do this, but it is what it is, and it's their decision to go ahead and do this, in my opinion. I think this is, again, do I think it's a great decision? No, I think it would be better to have something else happen, but it is what it is, and it's their decision if they want to bring him in or not. It's their decision, in my opinion. But I don't expect much from him. Maybe he'll do good at Watkins Glen, but other than that, I'm not expecting much, except maybe on the road courses. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's video, as we're talking about Christopher Bell and Ross Chastain. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race last weekend at Michigan, you probably saw the incident between Christopher Bell and Ross Chastain. With around 45 to 50 laps to go in the race at the second to last green flag, actually around 40 laps to go in the race, we saw Chris Bell basically come up in front of Ross Chastain and get in front of him and cause an incident. Now, Chris Bell, both him and Ross Chastain spoke to the media, and Chris Bell basically says that he definitely made a mistake, but Chastain should have lifted. Chastain also rated that he probably should have lifted as well, but he really shouldn't have been able to do that. Now, looking at the situation with this incident, Chris Bell, yes, he's kind of taking responsibility, but he's also kind of putting some of the blame on Ross Chastain. In my opinion, I don't want to sound disrespectful to Christopher Bell. I like Christopher Bell. But Christopher Bell's kind of in the wrong just a little bit, because Christopher Bell should have known that he was not going to be clear. And Christopher Bell basically was on older tires. Why is he trying to block Ross Chastain on fresh tires? Like, honestly, dude, you're going to have to come down pit road anyways, and you lost this race and lost a chance to win this race because you decided to put a block on Ross Chastain. I understand that you're trying to basically defend your position. You're trying to get a better finish and try to stay on the lead lap and have not Ross Chastain pass you. But at the same token, at the same time, that was a terrible block in my opinion. I have no understanding why you would have put a block on Ross Chastain like that, because Chastain, you know, is going to be aggressive. So why would you put a block up there? And again, I know Chastain maybe could have lifted, but you can't really lift at a track like Michigan because you got guys that are going to come behind you, and you're going to lose a lot of pace and a lot of speed. It's not like Bristol where you can lift and not lose a ton of ground. If you lift here, you're going to lose a lot of pace and a lot of momentum, and drivers are going to pass you and catch you. There were a couple of drivers behind Ross Chastain, like Bubba Wallace, who's right behind him, who's probably going to pass Ross Chastain. So I don't 100% get it, and he shouldn't have had the lift, in my opinion. I think Chastain is not in the wrong here. I think in this situation, Chris Bell is in the wrong right here, and I don't 100% agree, but I understand his frustration. But man, I can't really put the blame on Ross Chastain for this incident. I'm going to put the blame on Christopher Bell, and that's my opinion on that. But I think the blame should go to Christopher Bell for the incident and not Ross Chastain. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Nick Lights versus Carson Hocevar. Now, the Truck Series race was pretty uneventful, except for one incident that took place with around 40 laps to go in the Camping World Truck Series race. If you saw, we had Chandler Smith, who had been dominating the Truck Series race, who was catching Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar had Chandler Smith on his inside, and Nick Lights was already loose going into turn number 1. Well, Carson Hocevar basically got into Nick Lights unintentionally and got into the inside of Nick Lights. Now, basically there was contact around 40 laps to go in this race. Nick Lights looked really, really upset. Basically, he's chirping, I believe, at Carson Hocevar, and basically put out a tweet basically saying, you got to intentionally wreck somebody to basically stay on the lead lap. Carson Hocevar was also upset on the radio, basically criticizing, saying, what is Nick doing? I'm literally there on the inside. I don't know what Nick is trying to do right there. Now, I will say this. I know that Carson Hocevar had an incident a couple of weeks ago, and I do want to put blame on, sometimes you want to put blame on a driver because of what happened a few weeks ago. But in this situation, I can't put the blame on Carson. And I'll tell you, well, full blame on Carson. And I'm going to explain why. Did Carson get into Nick Lights? Absolutely. Is Nick Lights doing okay in the race? Yes, he was running anything around the top 30. He was having a decent race in the 33 truck. But Nick was kind of all over the place. His truck was really, really loose. He was all over the place, and he did come down on Carson. So you can't really put the full blame on Carson. I saw a lot of people on social media this weekend bashing Carson for the move. That wasn't intentional. I don't know why people are criticizing Carson for this when it really was not entirely Carson's fault. And let's also not forget that could have gone down a little more, yes. But Chandler Smith's also got to get off turn number 1 and make sure he doesn't wreck his truck. And he's got the leader below him as well, who's trying to lap him. And Carson is trying to stay on the lead lap as well. So I don't know why people are saying this is intentional. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just a misjudgment. I think it was just a racing incident to me because, yeah, Carson go up. and Nick lights come down. I think it was just a racing incident. I understand Nick being frustrated with Carson because, again, he's trying to do as good as he can to impress, get a full-time opportunity. Because Nick's a good driver. But the sad reality is that it really wasn't Carson's fault. And I get Nick being upset, but in my opinion, that really was not Carson's fault. I think there's been a lot of people who really bash Carson for no reason on social media. And I feel like, in my honest opinion, that was on Nick, basically just a racing deal. In my honest opinion, I think that was just a racing incident to me. That was just my opinion on that, though. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch versus Ross Chastain. Now, Ross Chastain has made another driver upset, whether it wasn't basically his fault or not. Basically, with around at the beginning of stage number 3, with around 150 laps to go, we saw some contact between Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain was trying to give some room to Ty Dillon, and Kyle Busch basically said that he got Chastain after the race was over, and Kyle Busch got hurt. Now, when I go back and watch the incident, I can't put blame on Ross Chastain for that incident either, because yes, did Chastain get into him? Absolutely. But it really was not anybody's fault right there. He was trying to give room, and he unintentionally got into Kyle Busch. It was just a misjudgment and an accident. It wasn't intentional. It was just an honest mistake. But I understand Kyle Busch's frustration. Kyle Busch, I think, feels like that a lot of drivers, whether intentional or not, have been gotten wrecked by Ross Chastain this year. And he's pissed off a lot of drivers so far this year. Chastain has made Martin Truex Jr. upset. He made him upset again this week. He got a lot of drivers like Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney this year. A lot of drivers, and Joey Hand too, have all been frustrated this year with the antics of Ross Chastain. But in this situation, I can't really put the blame on Ross Chastain. But I feel like a lot of drivers have been going after Ross Chastain because of how he races and if his impression, how he basically aggressive he is as a driver, and they kind of race him and don't show him most respect out there. But in this situation, I can't put the blame on Ross Chastain. Again, very similar to Chris Bell's situation. It really was nobody's fault in this situation. In my opinion, it was just a mistake. It was a restart. Chastain did not intentionally wreck anybody. It was just an unintentional incident. There was really nothing to do right there. In my opinion, no one's really at fault for that situation. It's just a really, really unfortunate situation. But Chastain's racking up a lot of enemies and a lot of people that are not liking him. And I'm telling you, it could really hurt Chastain in the playoffs. But in my honest opinion, I don't think really anybody's at fault for that incident, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez is speaking to Bob Pockrass around his potential deal with Trackhouse Racing, and Daniel Suarez says to me that he says his deal to remain at Trackhouse Racing is not signed yet, but is very, very close to being done. We've already talked about this on the channel after Daniel Suarez won at Sonoma, and it's been expected that he is going to return to Trackhouse Racing on a multi-year contract extension. Now, Daniel Suarez, in my opinion, this year has had his best career season up to date, of course, winning a race this year, but he's also had a really consistent year when it comes to top 5s and top 10s. And he's had a lot more top 5s and top 10s this year than he's had probably in previous seasons, and he's led the most laps he's ever led in his career. And I think he's an underdog to win, not to win a championship. He's underdog in the playoffs, in my opinion. I think he's going to be someone that's going to surprise a lot of people in the playoffs this year. You look at Daniel Suarez and how well he's been performing. He's done great. And also, Daniel Suarez brings a lot of funding and sponsorship as well from companies like CommScope and Coca-Cola and other companies that step up to the plate and sponsor Daniel Suarez. I think for the first time in his career, he feels like he's got a home really set for him long term. And I think how long the deal will be, I think the deal is at least going to be a 3 or 4 year extension. I think it's going to be a pretty long extension because I think Trackhouse really wants to keep Daniel Suarez because he's the guy that started this organization. He really started in this team. And I believe that they really want to long-term keep Daniel Suarez in the organization. Because, again, you look at Daniel Suarez's performances. He's been doing really good this year generally. I know people will disagree with me on that, but I think he's been doing a lot better this year than he has in previous years. He's has a team he's going to. Trackhouse looks a lot better. Now, has he performed as well as Ross Chastain generally this year? No, he's not performed as good as Ross Chastain most of the year. Well, except the last couple weeks, because you look at his average finish. He's had a 19.2 average finish the last 4 races compared to Ross Chastain, who's at a 25th place average finish. But again, both cars were up front at Michigan, contending there. It just shows that I think Daniel Suarez right now, he's actually been so much better this year and has shown a lot more pace and a lot more speed. And I do expect that we're going to see him continue to be really, really good at this team long term. I love Daniel Suarez, what he's been doing at that team, and I think that Suarez will continue to not just improve as a driver, as this organization, but I think the deal is going to be pretty long. I think he's going to be staying there pretty much for the rest of his career, and I think Suarez is only going to continue to not only get better, but I expect him at some point to win multiple races in a season. In fact, I think if he stays long term, he will be a championship contender one day. at this organization, which he has somewhere where he's loved. Didn't get the best treatment at JGR, didn't get the best treatment at Suarez Racing, was not great at Gaunt Brothers, but he's got a team that's wrapped around him and showing support for him. And I think that Daniel Suarez long-term is going to be really, really successful at this team. And I'm really, really excited for the future of Daniel Suarez, because I think he's not only going to be a really good driver for the team, but I think he's going to be really, really impressive long-term. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we're going to talk about Texas Motor Speedway. Now, this really came as a shock last night, but Crash Glades, who's part of the Speed Freaks channel, put out a tweet last night that basically Kenny Sargent, who's the other basic co-host of the Speed Freaks channel and Speed Freaks podcast, basically saying that Texas Motor Speedway, it sounds like they're going to blow up Texas Motor Speedway and reconfigure the track. It's also been noted that it's sounding like more than likely that IndyCar may or may not return to the track after 2023. They may come back for 2023. It's unclear if they're going to be back for 2023 or not. But it sounds like the next year could be the last year for the track as it currently stands. Now, we've also done some more information and some look at the area. And basically, according to some reports, it sounded like there's only going to be 1 race, maybe 2 races. But it sounded like the All-Star race may be gone from Texas Motor Speedway, and it's sounding like the event could either take place on April 19th, which could be a midweek race, or will take place on April 23rd, which I'm thinking is more than likely the date. When I saw this tweet last night, I was very, very shocked, and I'll explain why. I am very surprised if this is true, which I trust the Speed Freaks group. This is a huge, huge move, in my opinion, for Texas Motor Speedway. Because let's be honest and sincere about this. The racing at Texas Motor Speedway, since they've gone to this configuration of track, when they reconfigured this track back in 2017, and the reason they reconfigured the track is due to how long the rain delay was in 2016. It lasted 8 hours. They had issues basically getting the track dried, and the drying track system was a major issue. So they reconfigured the track in 2017. Well, when they reconfigured the track, the racing got horrendous. And it hasn't been good not just for NASCAR, but for IndyCar, except this year. I think the racing for this year in IndyCar actually was really, really good. Outside of that, I think the racing has really, really struggled. I'm going to be real and honest with a lot of people. I think the racing itself at Texas Motor Speedway, like I said, has not been really, really good. And I've bashed Texas Motor Speedway. But there's a couple things I want to talk about. Number one, what happens to COTA if Texas is moved to April? Are they potentially going to have back-to-back Texas dates? Are they going to have it? What I'm thinking is they're going to have Easter for the Bristol Dirt Race, and it may be there. But are they going to move COTA to later in the year, maybe to the Formula One weekend? That's one thing I'm very intrigued to see if that's going to happen. Another thing I'm very interested by, quintessentially, is are we only going to have 1 date next year, Texas, or 2 dates continuing? That's one thing I don't know. Also, is IndyCar going to come back or not long-term? I'll be honest, with the support, it's sounding more and more likely that it's not going to happen. And also, my other thing I question is what kind of configuration are they going to go with? There's 3 options it sounds like they could go with. First one, they go back to the traditional 1.5 mile layout that they had before the reconfiguration. Now, you're going to have to get rid of that PJ1, but if they're blowing up and reconfiguring the track and changing up the track, if they turn it back to 1.5 mile track, I think the racing actually will be really, really good. Because I think the racing actually will be a lot better. And the reason I say the racing actually will be a lot better is basically because if you look at the track itself, the track isn't great, but if you turn it to the regular 1.5 mile track, it actually, I think, will provide great racing because the next-gen car has been able to provide good racing, except here with the next-gen car, which should really tell everything there. They also could turn it into a 3-mile super speedway. It's very possible they could be doing what Atlanta's doing and turning into a big super speedway. And I'd be for it. If they turn it to 3-mile super speedway, I'd be definitely for it. Or they could be turning into a short track, very similar to Auto Club, and turning into a short track, which, again, I also be for it as well, if the racing is going to be better. But they had to change something. Because I think, one, you look at the attendance. Attendance has been really, really bad at Texas Motor Speedway. But you also basically look at the ratings. Ratings are good. You look at how much drivers in both series of IndyCar and NASCAR have just been outspoken. Not just fans like myself, but media members and NASCAR drivers, IndyCar drivers have been very, very outspoken in the industry about the issues at Texas Motor Speedway. And the fact that it sounds like it's become more and more likely there's actually going to be changes to Texas Motor Speedway, that's kind of crazy. And honestly, it sounds like the schedule is going to be more crazier than we initially thought. And we're very, very close to the schedule probably being announced. I would not be shocked if it comes out this week or next week that they're going to release the 2023 schedules. It sounded like this kind of being true. Again, I trust these reports and these people. And honestly, with whatever they're going to do to Texas, I'm for it. If they're going to make the track super speedway, I'm for it. If you go back to the traditional 1.5 mile track, I'm for it. Whatever is going to make the product better is great. And I wonder if Mike Faber, who's the new GM of the track, which he got announced as the new GM of the track recently, I wonder if he is a big factor into this as well. If he's a big factor in saving Texas, then I think we got to give Mark Faber a lot of props. I wonder if the Eddie Gossage group is basically leaving. Finally, we're starting to see less of that Eddie Gossage group. If Mark's not part of the Eddie Gossage team and he's the one basically making executive changes already, then he might save Texas Motor Speedway and save the tracks. Whatever they do, and if it actually makes the racing product better, then I'm definitely for it. So hopefully these reports end up being true and they do reconfigure the track and change the track up, because the track absolutely needs major changes and major fixing. Hopefully they're able to make some major changes to Texas and make the racetrack better, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. As it was expected and it finally announced on Friday that Bubba Wallace has signed a multi-year contract extension with 23XI Racing. He will continue to drive the team for multiple years, and they plan to keep Bubba Wallace for the long-term period. Now, it was not announced how long the extension is going to be with 23XI Racing, but one thing that needs to be cleared up is that he already had a contract with 23XI Racing for 2023. My expectation is that he at least has a 3 to 4 year extension with the organization, probably up to around 2026 or 2027. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm really happy about this move for Bubba. And this has been expected, but I'm very happy for Bubba for a lot of reasons. Number one, Bubba Wallace has been performing way better these last 6 or 7 weeks. Since we've gotten back from the break, Bubba Wallace has only had one finish outside the top 15, and that was at Road America, where he had some brake failure issues. He's had only 2 finishes as well, only 3 finishes outside the top 10 as well. He's had a lot more consistency. He's finished in the top 15 for the last 6 or 7 straight races, and has just shown a lot more consistency and a lot more pace as a driver in the Cup Series. And 23XI Racing is really improving right now. And Denny Hamlin has said that this has been something he's just been improving as a driver. And I think Bubba Wallace has generally been one of the most improved drivers in the Cup Series this year. He's been close to winning this year and has been doing really good in my opinion. Now, long term, what are my expectations? If Bubba Wallace continues to perform like he's been these last 7-8 weeks, I really think he'll make the playoffs next year, and I think he will be a contender for wins next year. Do I think he'll be a championship contender at least for the first year or two? No, absolutely not. I think it's going to take a year or two for him to be really a championship threat, because 23XI Racing really hasn't reached that peak and really reached that level yet. But I really do believe that Bubba Wallace is really going to make this team is going to continue to make this team stronger, and they're going to have their own pit crew, too, which, again, 23XI, we already know they're going to be changing their pit crews next year, which I'm really excited for that. I think 23XI needs to get new pit crew members, and I think it will improve their team. And their pit stops have generally been improving this year, too. You look at the averages, they were a little bit down to teams like Joe Gibbs Racing, but they're not having 12 to 13-second pit stops as consistently. They're having pit stops under 11 seconds. Now, and that's how the Bubba Wallace has had Kurt Busch's pit crew, and Kurt has not been cleared to come back yet. It's unclear if Kurt will be back this weekend or not. But like I said about Bubba Wallace, he's been doing so much better this year, deserves this contract extension, and I think long-term he's going to make this team so much stronger. I'm just so excited for Bubba. And I know some people have been really doubting the guy, but he had such a rough beginning of the year, and I think what he's so capable of and truly able to show has been coming these last weeks. Could you imagine without all those pit crew issues how well he'd be doing in the playoffs right now? I think he'd be doing extremely well. He's been doing so good this year. He'd probably be around the playoff cutoff line in 16th or 15th in points right now, if not for those issues. You go back to a race like NASCAR, where he could have probably won. Kansas, where he could have won this year. Michigan, nearly won there. He's had multiple races where he's been a contender, and not just at the super speedway tracks. He's been good on non-super speedway-esque tracks, and he's becoming the driver that everybody really wants him to be, and I think he's really showing it. He's put a lot of pressure on himself. If 13th place at Richmond is an indicator of how slow they're going to be, then I'm really excited for the long-term future of 23XI. And then you've got Tyler Reddick also coming over to the team in 2024. And they may have 3 cars in 2024 if Kurt Busch decides to come back next year. Maybe he stays a little longer. Who really knows? Maybe the other drivers like Ty Gibbs come over next year. Who knows at this point? But I am so excited and so pumped to see that Bubba Wallace is, again, I'm really happy that Bubba's come back next year long-term. Because, again, remember, he had a contract for 2023. But I think having him stay long-term with the team makes a ton of sense. I'm so excited and so happy to see that Bubba is going to be staying long-term with 23XI Racing. I think he's not going to be leaving the team anytime soon. And 23XI Racing's future is going to be really great. And I'm excited to see this because not only going to have Bubba Wallace, who's really showing an upbringing and uprising this year, but also Tyler Reddick is going to be coming to the team. And I think it's going to make the team not only better, but stronger as well long-term, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking more about Kyle Busch. Now, we've talked about Kyle Busch on this channel many, many times so far this year. And the reason we're talking more about Kyle Busch is Kyle Busch still, in the middle of August, is not signed for 2023 with an organization. It's unclear where he'll be going next year, if he'll return to Joe Gibbs Racing or not, but it's unclear. But the reason that we're talking about this is because Kyle Busch has not been able to find a sponsor. It's not a contract issue, it's a sponsor issue. If they're able to find a sponsor, Kyle Busch will be signed with an organization, whether it's with Joe Gibbs Racing or whether it's with another organization. That is to be determined. Well, Kyle Busch was asked a lot of questions in the media center this past week, and it revolves around his team, Kyle Busch Motorsports, and also maybe 2311 Racing as well. He says that the new deal is important to KBM. Hopes to share a ride with him and Brexton to share the ride in the long term in 2031. He basically talked about he hopes that he and Brexton, which Brexton will be 16 years old in 2031, he hopes to be sharing a truck with Brexton in 2031. He would like to stay in the Cup Series for the next 7-8 years. He mentions that he likes staying in the Cup Series to around 2030 when he's around 45 to 46 years old, and then go in trucks and share a ride with Brexton Busch and go out there. Now, I do think Kyle Busch wants to honestly go out there and win a truck championship before this happens, but Brexton is going to be 16 years old, and Brexton's been winning a lot of races as well. You look at Brexton in the lower series, he's been winning a lot of races, only 6 years old, and so a lot of drivers and people are really looking at Brexton to be a long-term future. He also says he would love to stay at Toyota, but he's not sure how much leverage he's going to have at Toyota. And also was asked about questions around his future, Kurt's future. He says that Kyle Busch says that it could be an option to go to 2311 Racing. That is a very big possibility, but he does mention that Kurt would love to come back for one more year next year, and Kyle Busch says he would love for Kurt to go finish out the way he should be able to finish out and not have really, really major issues, and would love for Kurt to come back and finish one more season. Now, we've talked about this a lot on the channel, but it's sounding more and more likely because David Wilson was also on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio on Dialed In with Claire B. Lake, and he reiterated, it sounded like David Wilson was not really confident that Kyle Busch is going to come back next year. Again, what is the problem? It's not having a sponsor. If Kyle Busch had a sponsor, he'd already be re-signed with Joe Gibbs Racing for 2023. The problem is Kyle Busch does not have a sponsor. And it's sounding more and more likely from a lot of industry chatter that they're done talking. It sounds like from people inside the industry that Kyle Busch may be done with Joe Gibbs Racing and may not even be talking to Joe Gibbs Racing anymore. Now, maybe they're done talking because maybe they're going to sign an extension and go back to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. But it is sounding more and more likely from a lot of the industry chatter. It's sounding more and more likely that Kyle Busch might be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the season and going to another team. Now, David Wilson reiterated that he would love Kyle Busch to stay at Toyota. He never mentioned Joe Gibbs Racing. So let's talk about places that Kyle Busch could go for 2023. I think there's 4 options for Kyle Busch for 2023. First one is returning to Joe Gibbs Racing. That's all going to come down to sponsorship and funding. And you have to look at someone else who's in the pipeline, Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs has been tearing it up in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. He's already scored 5 wins this year, has been in the top 4 points all year long, just has to have a little more consistency, and he'd be the points leader right now. And Ty Gibbs has just been so consistent. And outside of this weekend at Richmond, before that he was run top 15. He had finished in the top 20 in every single Cup Series race until this weekend, of course, where he had some issues with the engine near the halfway point of the race that took him out of contention. But Ty Gibbs has been really impressive and went up against Kyle Busch and had a really, really strong run there. And I think that Joe Gibbs wants Ty Gibbs he wants him to stay in Xfinity, but I think there's a good chance Kyle Busch, if he leaves the team, that Ty Gibbs could move up to the 18 car, and it's sounding more likely that that could be the case. So that could be a possibility if Kyle Busch doesn't return there. Next thing is 2311 Racing. Now, it's unclear if Kurt Busch will be coming back next year in 2023 or not. It's been unknown if he's going to come back in 2023 because, again, Kurt Busch could retire earlier with the concussion issues. Kurt Busch has still not come back after 4 weeks, and it's unclear if he will be ready to be back to compete for the playoffs. It's unclear. We hope he's back by the playoffs, but it's sounding more likely they may keep him out for the rest of the playoffs. Concussion is something that needs to be taken seriously, and Kurt could retire at the end of this year and retire a lot earlier. So that could be an option for Kyle Busch, is to go to 2311 Racing in 2024 or 2023. That's an option, but I'm not entirely sure because, again, they have sponsored funding at 2311, but that's an option. Another team that's been in the running is a Chevy organization. You can go to Hendrick Motorsports, but again, it sounded like they're going to keep Alex Bowman there long term, at least for 2023. And then you have Kaulig Racing. Now, Kaulig has been a team a lot of people are talking about as a potential place to go to. We haven't heard anything updated other than the fact that it was reported that Matt Kaulig has not talked to Kyle Busch, but I would not be shocked or surprised by now if Matt Kaulig has talked to Kyle Busch. You look at Kaulig Racing. The team is on the up and running. They're showing some more pace recently, and the team, they're actually not as bad of a team as we thought they were, and they're showing a lot of pace in the Cup Series right now. They've been good on the road courses, and I think Kyle Busch would do pretty solid at that organization. I think he'd do really, really good there. But the team that a lot of people like myself think he's going to end up going to next year is going to Stewart-Haas Racing. A lot of people in the industry believe that he's probably going to end up either at Stewart-Haas Racing or Kaulig, but a lot of indications say that a lot of us, like myself, think he's going to go to Stewart-Haas Racing and go to the 41 car. Now, why not the 10 car? Well, it's been reported and rumored that Eric Almirola actually may not retire in 2023 after all and come back in 2023. The Smithfield is trying to court him to come back next year and stay, and it's sounding more likely that he's going to stay. The 41 car, however, is sounding more likely that Kyle Busch may end up going to the 41 car next year and taking over for Cole Custer. Now, why is this going to happen? Well, you look at how well SHR is informing recently, at least for Kevin Harvick. 2 straight wins for Kevin Harvick and has had 60 career Cup victories now. Kevin Harvick also will welcome Kyle Busch into the organization and work together. Also, I think Cole Custer, no disrespect him, except this past week, has generally performed really, really horrendously this year on the Cup side of things in the 41 compared to his teammates. But he actually had a good run going at Richmond for power steering issues, so he really had a tough break this past weekend. However, I think that if Kyle Busch goes to the 41 next year, which is sounding more likely, I think he will be a contender. I think he'll be a championship threat. 41 car will be the most competitive it's been since 2018 with Kurt Busch in it, of course, his brother. And I think Kyle Busch will be a very solid driver in Stewart-Haas Racing. I think it will probably end up there, and we'll see what happens. But it's sounding more likely, and funny too. Gene Haas has a lot of funding and a lot of sponsorship, so I think Gene Haas will be willing to pay that extra money to keep Kyle Busch. So where I think Kyle Busch is going, I think Stewart-Haas Racing. So anyway, that is going to be for today's Lawn NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel notification to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below over that and comment your thoughts on today's news video. What are your thoughts on today's video? Let me know below. Let me know your score let me know your thoughts on today's video. Let me know your thoughts on where you think Kyle Busch will end up next year. And let me know your thoughts on what about Daniel Suarez, contract extension talks, and also Bubba Wallace, how his contract extension as well. Let me know that in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel will most likely be a silly season update. I'm probably going to be pushing the picks video back to Thursday unless we get some more major news this week. We'll keep an eye on our updates and tabs on that as we get closer to that. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.